We're going to look at the issue of globalisation and governments. How does globalisation affect governments? And what we'll look at first of all is this tricky issue of transfer pricing. So we're talking about transnational corporations and multinational corporations that operate across the world. And what transfer pricing is a method of pricing goods and services which is transformed within the company to reduce tax burden, and therefore increase profits. So all transnational companies, what they tend to do is try and reduce their overall tax liabilities by exploiting lower tax rates in the world, in where they operate and where they sell goods and services, and also to exploit tax loopholes. Now this can be done completely legitimately. By that I mean within the law, and therefore it is termed tax avoidance. If it's illegitimate and outside the law, then that of course would be tax evasion. Well, on the whole we're talking about tax avoidance. Now whether it's morally correct, of course, is a very different matter. So this has caused a lot of controversy, and the effect of course is to reduce the level of tax revenue in a country. So if you take a country like the UK, it means there's less tax revenue available for the government to redistribute in terms of part of the welfare state, and also provide merit goods such as health and education. Indeed, the HMRC, which is the tax authority in the UK, argues that the tax gap is about 25%. And that's the difference between the tax that should come in by law and what actually comes in. And they argue that this 25% gap is solely due to transfer pricing. Now, a very good example, which was controversial, was Starbucks. Other companies, such as Apple and Fiat, a whole plethora of companies, Amazon, for example, have been accused really in the media of avoiding significant tranche or amount of tax. Starbucks was a case in point. For 3 years, it paid virtually zero zero corporation tax within the UK. And one way it does this is, say you have Starbucks in the UK, which I use, and many cafes, a large organisation. What they do is they get the beans from the Netherlands, and they get the roasted beans from there, I think, and they pay a lot of money for those beans. Yeah, so quite big profits are made in the Netherlands because they're overpaying for those beans. Say the beans should really cost, say, 10 pence per coffee. Well, they're paying something like 0. So they're paying maybe 10 pence for the beans, okay? Whereas the cost to actually produce the beans possibly costs something like 0.2 pence or something like that. So they're overpaying for those beans in the Netherlands, make big profits there, and then they were able to exploit a tax loophole within the Netherlands, which meant that they could buy the green beans pre-roasted from Switzerland and pay next to no tax in Switzerland, being a low tax economy in many ways. So they make their big profits in Switzerland. So transfer pricing basically works where you declare your profits in an ultra low tax economy, often locating production in a low tax economy, or shifting assets, financial assets around, or indeed paying for intellectual property, the so-called creativity, in a lower tax economy. A lot of companies, of course, have their headquarters in low tax economies like Jersey, Guernsey and the Cayman Islands, where they pay really 0% corporation tax. And so how do governments deal with this? Well, the regulation comes about through the Organisation Economic Cooperation Development, the OECD, have guidelines, and what they argue is that, the guidelines stipulate that the price of transferred resources should reflect the prices in the country as if the TNC was not connected. So that I suppose that Starbucks in the UK should pay the same for the coffee beans, or a very similar amount in the ballpark, to a small independent cafe down the road. Now, maybe Starbucks benefits from economies of scale, there might be some differences there, but it should pay something along the lines of other businesses in the UK for that input. And this is called the arm's length principle, as though the TNC was at arm's length and not there. Now, under EU rules, these tax advantages through tax avoidance are regarded as state aid, as the state actually providing a subsidy for the firm, and they're not allowed within the EU's single European market, and the European Court of Justice polices that. And so perhaps another factor that influences firms, transnational corporations, or sometimes known as multinational corporations, is media pressure. So when there was big media pressure on Starbucks, they came to an arrangement with HMRC to pay more tax, because they certainly didn't want the bad publicity. And indeed, Richard Murphy, who's a big campaign on this, and worth looking at his website, argues, I think, for a fair tax sort of guarantee that they should sign up to. And then, on the broader question, obviously governments could benefit from foreign direct investment in the country, but remember, investment can also come out of the country because of the relative footloose nature of the TNCs within a globalised world. But if you do have FDI, it can be a significant factor in economic growth. Foreign direct investment will help economic growth, help economic development. Of course, there's danger of Faustian pact. What about the environmental damage? What is the government allowing the company to do? And this is an issue with some Chinese investment in some African countries, for example. Labour and capital, of course, there's a danger that it can move to a low-cost, low-tax economy, as I was saying. So richer people, if you try and tax them more by putting up income tax, they can move quite easily to a low-tax economy, such as Switzerland. And of course, richer people tend to be more able to be mobile, part of an international community. And so if you overtax people, put up income tax too much, your labour will move. And the same with corporations. If corporation tax is too high, tax on company profits is too high, then capital may shift to other countries rather. Now, of course, there are other reasons why you might want to locate somewhere like the UK or France, such as the culture, such as the language, such as skilled labour force, benefiting from internal economies of scale, perhaps. So, income tax and even VAT, and certainly corporation tax, it's hard to increase those, and there tends to be a race to the bottom between countries to lower those taxes, such as the policy in Britain from 2010 onwards has been to lower corporate taxes to encourage foreign direct investment in the UK, so we can compete with Ireland. Okay, but then other countries will follow suit, and generally there's a ratcheting down effect, of course, which means it's harder for governments to raise tax revenue, to provide things that many governments want to provide, and certainly people on the centre-left would want to provide in terms of merit goods and redistribution. Of course, tax evasion and indeed avoidance is easier within a global world, and also we are more susceptible to global shocks, such as in the UK after the credit crunch. A big shock that hit the UK later was declining exports to the Eurozone, which was having problems as a result of the crisis within the euro. So I hope this provides a great overview of the problems that governments have within a globalised economy. Thank you very much for watching.